welcome to another edition of Around the Mic. I'm Evan, that's Joe and David, and just in case you had forgotten. Today we're going to wade into a kind of heavier subject. It's what the philosophical realm calls the problem of evil, which is if there can a good God, a good all-powerful God exist when evil also exists in the world. And I think I thought of this topic last week, but it's also very timely with what's going on in Afghanistan and even in Haiti with the earthquake. And there's a lot, well, I guess that doesn't really have to do with evil, but there's a lot going on in the world. And when a lot goes on, people come back to this question. I want to start it on a kind of biblical foundation, as we should. There's several instances in the Bible where prophets or people ask God about this question. Specifically for me, I've been studying the book of Habakkuk, and if you look...
Bless you.
Thank you. If you look in... It's kind of a conversation between Habakkuk and God about these things. And in chapter 1, verse 2, Habakkuk says, "How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out to you violence, yet you do not save. Why do you make me see iniquity and cause me to look on wickedness? Yes, destruction and violence are before me. Strife exists and contention arises. Therefore the law is ignored and justice is never upheld, for the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore justice comes out perverted." And then God answers him, and he doesn't like the answer very much. So in verse 13, he says, "Your eyes are too pure to approve evil, and you can look on wickedness with favor. Why do you look with favor on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they?" So I think there's no better way to start this discussion than to ask the question, gentlemen, can a good, all-powerful God exist when there is so much evil in the world?
Yes.
See you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's kind of an easy question for us. I mean, we're Christians. We, of course, know that he exists.
It's interesting, and this came to me as you were reading that. It's interesting to me that we will ask that question, but we will also praise God for being so patient with us in our times of wickedness. And so it's easy for us to see why he would tolerate my evil actions, because he loves me so much, and therefore that's just his mercy. But when he tolerates other people's evil, I go, why will you let bad things happen? And so one of the things is because I think evil builds to grace, and that's one of the reasons. Now, of course, I don't think it's a singular plane, but that's the side of it I'm going to answer. David?
Yeah. There's so much that can be said about this subject, because it's one of the most common questions, even amongst, especially amongst young people and young believers and non-believers, because they want to know, well, if your God is so powerful and so loving and so almighty, then why does he allow, and you said the Haiti thing, why does he allow bad things to happen? Yeah. Not just evil, but why does he allow bad things to happen? Why do earthquakes happen and tornadoes and things that kill people that don't deserve it? They're just living their life and just, you're just out in Kansas just farming, and then this tornado comes along and destroys all your crop. Doesn't even kill you, but you've lost your livelihood and maybe your ability to survive. Why did he make those people suffer?
He asked the question, you're supposed to answer it.
But I have a quote that I was going to read that I think it's from Billy Graham, and it says this. It says, "The Bible teaches that Satan is the author of sin. Sin is the reason that we have afflictions, including death. All of our problems and suffering, including death itself, are a result of man's rebellion against God. But God has provided a rescue in the person of his son, Jesus Christ. That's why Christ died on the cross. That's why he rose from the dead." So I think that quote kind of sums up just a little bullet point for us. It's sin's fault, which is our fault. But because of sin, bad things happen. Evil happens. Death happens. Suffering. All those things happen because of sin. Yeah. And then in that same article that he wrote, it's really kind of impressive, because he basically says one of the, I guess, side effects of bad things happening and evil happening is it provides an opportunity for good things to come from them. for instance, Christ coming to die for us. And he gave the example of like a fire happening, and then seeing all of the response people come in, the fire and the health and everybody coming in and showing compassion. And so that's I think a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, David just summed up my entire argument, so remember that when we come to the end of the video. But that's actually something Mr. Rogers used to say a lot. He said he would get overwhelmed watching the news at all the evil, and his mom would always say, look to the helpers, look to the people there who are trying to do good. Mm-hmm. And that's how he was reminded that God was even good in that moment. I think that's a good segue into my next question, which do you think... So evil exists, God also exists. Does God work to limit how evil the evil is?
I think when you look at Job, the story of Job, and Satan comes as the accuser, and God puts limits. You can push this far. You can take his crops, but not his children. You can harm his children, but not his... You can harm his body, but you can't kill him. God draws these lines. Mm-hmm. And so we see a very clear story that, yes, God does draw lines where evil can and cannot work, which should, in the believer's life, grow our trust and shrink our anxiety when bad things are happening, because we know God drew the lines. Our job is to do well within the lines that God's drawn for us. We're not supposed to be drawing the lines for God. We're supposed to function within the lines he's drawn for us. And we have pastor friends right now on the field in Afghanistan that are paying their lives for their faith. And we could sit here and go, why would God let that happen? But what we're supposed to do is trust that God's drawn the lines. Yeah. And pray for them, lift them up. And if the God opens the door for us to provide a resource to save them, then by all means, we're to do everything within our power to do good within these evil times. But evil doesn't happen because evil overrode the lines. God has drawn them firm, and Satan can't do anything about them.
I also think that was a great answer, and I don't need to add anything to it, but I had written it down, so I'm going to say it. You can see it in the very first act of evil in the Bible, which is what Adam and Eve did. Well, then God gave them clothes. Even though they had committed this great sin, they didn't do what he asked them to do. He was still compassionate enough to give them clothes.